The inevitable has happened, my friends. The Mozilla Foundation is doing mass layoffs. 30% of their total Mozilla Foundation staff is getting the axe, along with their entire advocacy department, including their vice president of advocacy. This originated from reporting yesterday out of TechCrunch. I have managed to confirm that this is indeed happening. However, I have not been able to get a copy of the internal email that has been sent around at the Mozilla Foundation. So I'm going to read a little bit here from TechCrunch.com, which hasn't published the entirety of that email, just snippets from it. I would really like to get the whole thing. Any Mozilla Foundation employees out there who would like to send that over to the Lunduke Journal, please feel free. I would not object to reading the entire email. So the email in question went out to Mozilla Foundation employees, letting them know about the layoffs and the changes in strategy and that's going on. When that got leaked to TechCrunch, TechCrunch then reached out to Mozilla. Mozilla confirmed it. I reached out to Mozilla. They ignored me. I reached out to someone who is tangentially related to Mozilla, and they confirmed it. And then the email reads in part as follows. No, sorry. This is the confirmation email that TechCrunch got. Quote, "The Mozilla Foundation is reorganizing teams to increase agility and impact as we accelerate our work to ensure a more open and equitable technical future for us all. That unfortunately means ending some of the work that we have historically pursued and eliminating associated roles to bring more focus going forward." I'm sorry. That's just really funny to me. So they're reorganizing teams to increase agility, right? So they're laying off 30% of their staff so that they can go faster and increase their impact as they accelerate their work. That's why you lay off 30% of your staff, to work faster. Okay. All right. We'll get into the actual reasons for this in a moment here. I'm just going to scroll down. You can go read the whole article over at techcrunch.com if you like. Announcing the layoffs in an email to all employees on October 30th, about a week ago, the Mozilla Foundation's executive director, Nabiha Syed, confirmed that two of the foundation's major divisions, advocacy and global programs, are no longer part of our infrastructure, end quote. After publication, Borman, the chief communications officer over at the Mozilla Foundation, told TechCrunch that, quote, "Advocacy is still a central tenet of Mozilla Foundation's work and will be embedded in all other functional areas." Quote, this is from the internal email, supposedly. I have not gotten a copy of this, so I cannot confirm it, but I can confirm that this email exists, and this is all theoretically real. Quote, "Our mission at Mozilla is more high stakes than ever," wrote Syed in an email to staff, a copy of which he was shared with TechCrunch. Come on, someone send that to me. I haven't gotten this one. I need this email. Quote, "We find ourselves in a relentless onslaught of change in the technology and broader world, and the idea of putting people before profit feels increasingly radical. That's why they're doing layoffs, because they're putting people before profit. So they're firing people so that they keep more of their money. That makes sense, right? Yeah. Navigating this topsy-turvy, distracting time requires laser focus, and sometimes saying goodbye to the excellent work that has gotten us this far, because it won't get us to the next peak. Lofty goals demand hard choices," end quote. Oh, okay. All right. So what is exactly causing this? Why is the Mozilla Foundation laying off so many people? Now, before we go further, I want to point out that this is not Mozilla Corporation. Mozilla Corporation and Mozilla Foundation technically are separate things. They just are very, very tightly interwoven. In fact, at times, the Mozilla Foundation and the Mozilla Corporation have shared the exact same leadership. The CEO and executive director would a lot of times have been one and the same, such as under the rule of Mitchell Baker. Likewise, when Mozilla Foundation Corporation announces a lot of their annual reports and their revenues, a lot of the times they just combine it all together. They just put it all out there together because, yes, they are separate, but they're not that separate. You know what I mean? They're kind of one and the same. They're like a one household living in the same house, but there are technically separate people in that house. It's kind of the same deal. So what exactly is causing this? Well, one thing is very, very clear. Mozilla is about to lose a lot of income. Up until now, right, over 80%, well over 80% of all of the money that comes into Mozilla in general, corporation or foundation, the whole works, comes from Google. It comes from search engine placement from Google inside Firefox. That's where Mozilla makes all of its money, with just a few crumbs left over coming from other sources like donations and the like. Now, there has been a recent lawsuit that Google is losing, that Google has lost and is theoretically going to appeal, but we'll see how that goes, where Google has been ruled to be a monopoly and cannot engage in exactly that practice going forward, meaning Google cannot pay huge amounts of money to Mozilla to put Google in as the default search engine in Firefox. They will be prohibited from doing that, which means potentially in the next few months, a few months, that money that Mozilla makes, that 80% of the revenue is gone, finito, out of here. So Mozilla is going to be running on fumes. They're going to be running on the money that they've got in the can, which they've got a good amount of cash sitting around. But there's no way to continue operations beyond the next year or so unless they either A, bring in a metric ton of money to replace the money that they're no longer going to get from Google, or they just have to do massive layoffs. So the layoffs were coming. I've predicted this for months now. The layoffs had to happen from a financial point of view. In fact, this is the Mozilla Foundation layoffs. The big news story that is going to hit likely before the end of this year, it's November 6th, 2024 right now. It would be very surprising to me if we did not hear about layoffs from Google Corporation, which has far more employees, before the end of December. And the reason for that is Mozilla cannot afford to keep those employees on if Google isn't paying that. If it doesn't look like the lawsuit, an appeal from Google is going Google's way, Mozilla's got no choice. They need to start axing people and axing people fast. Now, there's other possibilities here, because you'll note that one of the things that that Mozilla Foundation was quick to axe was their VP of Advocacy, a lady by the name of Ashley Boyd, along with the entire advocacy department. Now, where this starts to get a little bit interesting is advocacy at Mozilla takes multiple forms and goes in multiple directions. Part of it is privacy and open standards and things that many of us would assume that Mozilla would be pursuing. From a 2017 announcement of Ashley Boyd, the VP of Advocacy's hiring, quote, "Ashley will lead Mozilla's work to fuel the open internet movement and mobilize millions to stand up for a free open web. Our mission is ambitious, making the health of the internet a mainstream issue. It is also vital as centralization, surveillance, exclusion, and other online threats proliferate. We need a movement to keep the web a global public resource." Okay. All right. So most of which is going to be very reasonable to most people. Like, okay, open standards for the web, personal privacy when you're online, personal security, decentralization, lack of surveillance, all these sorts of things. Most people are going to be like, yeah, okay, let's advocate for that. Let's push for that in the legal system, within other companies and web standards and the like. But advocacy at Mozilla has also taken on very distinctly political overtones, including the stated goal of eliminating all conservatives from the online arena, right? So, and I know that sounds very extreme and it's weird, but it is part of Mozilla's stated objectives over the last several years is to do what they call more than deplatforming of Republicans, conservative political figures, conservative people, and speaking conservative ideas, that sort of thing. And they wanted to do more than deplatforming, meaning they wanted to make sure in social media sites, blogging sites, video publishing sites like YouTube and whatnot, that people with the wrong political ideas would not be allowed to publish in those sites, meaning they would be deplatformed. And that Mozilla had a goal of going farther than that, of finding ways to stop those people from being online at all. It's a crazy notion. It's a wild, wild notion that someone with that an organization advocating for a free and open web and open standards and free speech would also at the same time be advocating for the mass censorship and silencing of essentially roughly half or more of the population. It's fairly wild. And over the time that Mozilla has advocated for these sorts of things, along with many other political, fairly extreme stances, and spent a lot of money on them, Mozilla's total Firefox market share has dropped wildly quickly. I mean, it drops down from was 5% and then 4%. I don't even know what it is now, 2 point something percent. I mean, it's getting to the point where Firefox is interesting in that it is a semi-open source browser. It's not completely open source. There's many closed source components within it, which a lot of people don't realize, and a lot of Linux distributions ship those closed source components. Worth looking into. But it also is it's a household name because Firefox was the king of open web browsing for so many years that we want it to remain that way. And we don't see a lot of alternatives right now to move away from Firefox to other open browsers. The good news is increasingly that is changing. There are more browsers out there between Ladybird and Brave and so many other things that fill a number of different niches. But just the same, that Firefox market share nosediving like that means that even if Google wins its appeal, which it probably will not, there is very little reason to think that the money that Mozilla is bringing in from Google will stay consistent. It is going to keep going down because Firefox's market share is going down and it's just less valuable, increasingly less valuable over time for Google or anyone else to do business with Mozilla because their total market share is just dwindling crazy. So what Mozilla has done over the last year or so is shift away from being a web browser centric company to being a pro-advertising, pro-AI company. In fact, they have several different artificial intelligence companies that now exist inside Mozilla to spin up AI website creation and other things to try and spin up AI-related businesses. None of those have taken off so far. But that doesn't stop them from trying. In fact, Mozilla's 25-year roadmap, their vision for the next quarter century of Mozilla, doesn't even include a web browser. It doesn't include Firefox at all. It is just artificial intelligence and advertising and nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. It's just that. So they're kind of laser focused on that. So with money going away and with clear public backlash against their extreme political agendas, right? They're very extreme, like the more than deplatforming stuff just being the tip of the iceberg. That has resulted, I think, very clearly, demonstrably to the decline of Firefox market share. It does make a certain amount of sense to do two things. One, they need to get rid of people, because they have too many people that they cannot afford to keep, and they have too many people that are doing things that are not going to be earning them revenue, right? Like the advocacy division of Mozilla, whether they're advocating for the crazy censorship and the political things or advocating for common sense things like privacy and security. Regardless, Neither of those are earning income for Mozilla, so they've got to go. I mean, it just kind of makes sense whether you like it or not, right? And the second thing is Mozilla needs to distance itself from the things that have alienated over half of their potential audience. So while Firefox currently has a dismal market share, in theory, it could be double what it currently is if they had not alienated half of the populace. And if you doubled Firefox's current market share, that puts them in a much better position to earn revenue going forward. So they've got to get rid of people, and they've got to distance themselves from the advocacy. That's clearly what they're doing, but they're doing it what's interesting is they did it on election day in the United States, where the news story kind of got buried. They did not tell the public that they were doing it. There's no announcement here at all. I mean, they sent out an email internally, and the only reason we know about it is because people leaked the information out. But they buried the story. And the fact that they're distancing themselves from their advocacy division is buried as well. Because if they make a big deal about distancing themselves from advocacy, about basically laying off their advocacy departments, they're going to get massive backlash from the only users they have left, which are people who are extreme pro-censorship, hard left type individuals, or people who desperately cling to the dream of what Firefox once was, but is no longer. Just to make a few other interesting connections here before we head off, the Mozilla over the last year, the Mozilla Corporation, not the foundation, has been in absolute turmoil. The board of directors over Mozilla ousted one of the person that was going to become the CEO while he was away getting treatment for cancer, so that they ousted him like in the most unceremonious ways, and this crazy Game of Thrones style power struggle went on within Mozilla Corporation, where the board installed a new CEO from one of their own to basically guide the entire corporation to become an advertising agency. This is really wild. I've published a couple of articles and shows on this at the Lunduke Journal, which you can just go check out at lunduke.locals.com. If you want to get some more backstory on all of this. But it's absolute chaos over there right now. And with this absolute chaos and the extreme uncertainty of being able to simply keep the lights on going forward, it's not surprising that layoffs are looming. It's just simply not surprising. I mean, you've seen Firefox over the last few releases has increasingly added a number of pro-surveillance features and pro-advertising features. They've started an advertising company and have started shifting all of Mozilla into an advertising company. They're becoming an ad broker now, much like what Google is. I mean, Google's an ad broker company. That's where they earn the majority of their revenue. And Mozilla seems to be trying to transition themselves into a very similar business model. Pro-surveillance, pro-advertising, pro-AI, anti-open standards, anti-open source, anti-free speech, pro-censorship. It's a very strange thing that's happening with Mozilla, because it bears almost no resemblance to certainly what I think many people thought Mozilla was just a few years ago. It's an absolutely wild transformation going on, and the tumultuous nature of all of this and the lack of funding coming from Google in the months ahead means this is just the very beginning of the Mozilla layoff story. So we'll keep an eye on it as we go. Again, anyone from Mozilla Foundation who has a copy of that email, send it on over to me so I can publish the whole thing. Why do so many tech journalism outlets get leaked internal memos and then publish like 3 heavily edited sentences from the memos, from the emails, and not the rest of it? I mean, I think we know why, but how strange is that? I appreciate TechCrunch for reporting on this story. It's very rare that any of the tech news outlets will report on what's really happening in Mozilla, and at least in this case, they're reporting on a little bit of it, though they're leaving out really key details and background information about why this is happening, which is also not surprising. But doggone it, publish the whole thing so that we have a public record of what's happening. It's part of doing the journalism, man. When I got leaks from Red Hat or IBM, I mean, shoot, I published the entire slide deck of the Red Hat presentation demonizing white people, where they told their employees that they should hate white people. And not only did I publish that, I published every single slide and all of the presenter notes from all of the slides, because all of you can then read all the details, look at all of the information, and determine for yourself what's important, in addition to whatever opinions I can layer on top of that. But you can then have all the information. Whereas this, I mean, from TechCrunch, the article is not a badly written one, but we only got like a paragraph and a half. And the way it's edited, clearly at least some words were cut out. I would like to see what the rest of it is. Maybe there's nothing else interesting in that email, but I would like to see it all. So if anyone out there has it, go ahead and toss it over to me. If you go to lunduke.com, you can find all the contact information, and I will gladly publish the entirety of that little email. And thank you again to the Lunduke Journal subscribers, lunduke.com. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the whole gosh darn glorious inner tubes, I do declare and broadcast.